The other day, I was enjoying one of my favorite flavors of chips, pepperoncini. But after looking at the ingredients, I realized that pepperoncini takes a back seat in the ingredients of this recipe. It's the last ingredient. There's bell pepper powder, jalapeno powder, even natural flavors is above pepperoncini. I was basically just eating jalapeno chips under a new name. These chips are like the LaCroix drinks, you know? It was made in a factory that once had a picture of a pepperoncini on the wall. And to make matters worse, this is actually an improvement, because if you look at their old ingredients on the Kettle website, they didn't even used to have pepperoncini pulp in the ingredients at all. So they've actually made them better, and they still hardly have any pepperoncini in them. So I did what anyone would do. I grew some pepperoncini peppers, so that way I could make pepperoncini flavored chips myself. I mean, how hard can it be? I've said pepperoncini pepper a lot of times in the beginning of this video, and there's probably quite a few of you who have no idea what they even are. So according to West Coast Seeds, where I got the seeds from to grow these peppers, they are an Italian heirloom. They start off green, and as they turn red, they become sweeter. The rich taste is like a sun-dried tomato with just a tiny hint of warmth. So they have a little bit of spice, but really very minimal. And West Coast Seeds thought this was such an important line that they even wrote it in the description twice. There's a couple different types you can find. You can find the more yellowy, small little guys in the jars, but the variety I decided to grow are long and kind of squiggly looking. So there you go, now you are an expert on pepperoncini peppers. So let's have a look at how my plants are doing right now. Camera guy, that's the wrong pepper. Move over. So as you can see, my plants seem to be doing pretty well. They're loaded up with peppers, which is really great. So to make these pepperoncini chips, what we first need to do is pick some peppers. I needed about 4, so I picked 4 fairly long, big ones. And also this seasoning, if you don't have pepperoncini peppers, you can also make this with jalapeno as well. And just maybe use like 2 good sized jalapenos instead. So what we need to do is dry out these peppers so we can blend it up and make our pepper powder. I just cut mine into small little segments. If your peppers are like a little bit hotter than that, you can take out some seeds. It's very easy to do that. But these peppers are really not that spicy, so you can probably just leave them all in and it would be fine too. So I put mine in an air fryer at 200 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour. You could do this in an oven as well. Maybe just check it a bit quicker, but use about the same temperature, about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. So once they are nice and dry and like really crispy, like if you break them, they snap and they make kind of a crunchy noise. Then you're good, then you know it's ready. So now it's time to make the seasoning for our chips. Here's some I made earlier. You know, just like every cooking video, they always do that. Here's some I made the day before. So we need 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 heaping teaspoon of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder or garlic granules, 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder or onion granules, 1/2 heaping teaspoon of dried parsley. All that can then be added to a blender or a spice grinder. And you just really want to blitz this until it's a very fine powder, because the finer it is, the easier it will stick on the chips. And you want your chips to stay seasoned, so it's an important step. So then you'll have some powder that looks like this. So I used about 6 small potatoes. I actually grew these potatoes, so I'm making real homegrown chips. So that's one thing I really noticed from my chips, was the potato flavor was way more intense in a good way. You know, it really worked with the chip. You know, it wasn't just like a cracker for the seasoning. You know, it actually had some flavor. It actually gave to the experience. You know? But you can use like Kennebec potatoes or Rasa potatoes or kind of whatever you really want to use. You want to use potato varieties that are good for roasting or the kind that you'd make fries from. So now it's time to get out your mandolin or your just amazing knife skills and slice these potatoes into very thin pieces. You can kind of play around with this depending on how crunchy you like your chips. You know, if you want them to be like Lay's, you're gonna really try to cut them as thin as possible. But for me, I kind of went a little bit in the middle between Lay's and Kettle chips because I kind of like the crunch, but I also like the lightness of chips too. So for deep frying, I decided to use a wok because it has a narrow base to it, which allows me not to have to use as much oil. It's really helpful if you can have a thermometer nearby that you can like keep and monitor the temperature of the oil, because it needs to get to about 350 degrees. And once it gets to that temperature, you're good to start chucking in your potatoes. You're gonna need to cook these in small batches because the oil temperature drops drastically once you load in the potatoes because all the water in the potatoes is getting evaporated out. So you're gonna take about a handful of potatoes and, carefully place them in there, making sure not to let any stick together, because if they're 2 layers thick, they're not gonna cook at the same rate as all the others, and then you'll have chewy potato chips, which is just not a good thing at all. I used a slotted spoon to make sure the potato wasn't sticking together. If you sliced up different sizes of potatoes, you're gonna want to cook those in different batches. Like if you chopped up some smaller potatoes and then a large one, you're gonna wanna cook all the ones that are that small size in one batch and then the ones that are larger in another batch. Because if you cook small and large ones together, they're gonna cook at different times, and then your chips aren't gonna be completely crispy. So you'll have to like pick through the small ones and take those out and then wait longer for your bigger ones. Mine took roughly maybe 2 or 3 minutes to cook, but it really varies on the thickness and the temperature of your oil. So you kind of have to just watch them the whole time. And once they start getting that kind of light golden brown color, you can then start gently and carefully taking them out of the oil. What I would do is I kind of had a 2-bowl setup where I would fish out all the chips that I've just cooked and dump them into that bowl. That is where I'm gonna season them. So once they're all in the bowl, you can just sprinkle on some of that seasoning, and then you can toss the bowl around and stir it with a spoon, or if you wait until it has cooled down, you can just use your hands. But if you are gonna use your hands to mix them around, be very careful because they just come out of hot oil, so don't just stick your hand in there right away. So once those chips have kind of cooled off, I would dump them into another bowl, so that way I have my seasoning bowl ready for the next batch. So these are all the chips I was able to make. They look pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. So putting them on a scale, they weighed 200 grams or 7 ounces. So that's how many potato chips I was able to make. Mine is maybe a handful because my brother and I were snacking on some right after we made them, because it's kind of hard not to snack on a few while you're making these. So now I think it's time for a comparison. We got the pepperoncini chips here, and we have pepperoncini chips at home variety, and they stay crunchy too. Like I made these about 3 days ago and they're still real crunchy. Can't even make it into my mouth. Like the pepper flavor is really nice in this. Now here we go. If you see, we got some of the kettle ones now. The spice level is pretty similar. The kettle ones are obviously way more crunchy, and they have more of a vinegar flavor to them too, because I didn't add any vinegar in the spice seasoning because I didn't have any vinegar powder. If you wanted to, you could probably add some, maybe like 1/4 teaspoon or so. With the chips I made, I really wanted the pepperoncini flavor to be the dominant flavor, or to be really up there and really noticeable. You still get a bit of the garlic and the parsley and the onion powder, but the most dominant flavor is that kind of nice pepperoncini flavor, which is very difficult to describe. It's a very interesting flavor because it is very subtle. It's like a bell pepper that has a tiny bit of heat to it, which maybe makes sense as to why they just used bell pepper powder in these, because maybe they're like, yeah, it's way cheaper and it basically just tastes the same. But I feel in these pepperoncini chips, the vinegar flavor is that kind of dominant flavor. It's like a vinegary, peppery flavor, So they're all good. They're both really good in their own ways. Like, I'm not gonna stop eating these either because they're delicious as well. And if you get a chance to try some and you haven't tried them before, definitely do try some. Also, the potato flavor in these is way stronger too. You got a way nicer potato-y flavor, which is just because of the freshness of the potatoes I used. This is just a quick recipe I came up with on the fly. So if you find a better way to do it, go for it. So if you did enjoy this video, why not check out my Ultimate Pepper Lovers Pizza video?